I have to thank everyone in the room because I recently had a great honor. I did a TEDx Bushwick talk on the cannabis revolution, and a large part of my talk was about serving this community. So I want to thank all of you guys for creating that opportunity for me to spread the message on a different platform. Thank you guys. Oh yeah, I'm Mike, by the way. Hi. For those of you who don't know me, hey. It's my pleasure to organize these events and bring all these talented people together to help each other. Shout out to Sam from the Impact Hub for providing this great venue. If you're looking for a space to work, you could get a free week at Impact Hub. Just go on their website. It's impacthub.nyc.com/free week. impacthubnyc.com/free week.
Free week is good.
Yeah.
Did you say free week? Sorry.
That's on highny.com/free week.
Sorry, my mistake.
Before we get into tonight's program, I just wanted to say brand is something that's going to be increasingly important in the cannabis industry as it continues to grow. There's still not really monster brands like the Coca-Colas of the cannabis world. There's a couple of people in this room who I know are working to fill that gap, but it's going to be an interesting space as the laws change and businesses can cross state lines and consumers become more educated and have more options as well. So in a past life, I worked at Google selling brand marketing to Fortune 100 companies. So this is really of particular interest for me, and I'm so happy to have the speaker we have here tonight because he's an expert and he's doing really cutting edge stuff. So before we even get to that, I've got a lot of announcements on some awesome events that are coming up. I actually have 10 incredible events that people in this community are responsible for, so if it's cool, I'm going to share those with you. Is that cool, guys?
Yeah.
Cool. Number one, the Holistic Cannabis Summit. Is Laura Logano in the room?
No.
Mia, are you around? Mia. So ask Mia, stand up real quick. If you guys have questions, that's the woman to see. There's going to be a free virtual summit with some awesome speakers. It's on April 4th to 7th. It's online, it's free. That's the person to talk to.
Yeah, you need
Guys, we got 10 of these, so let's hold the applause. I'm sorry, I love the love, but let's do it later. Thank you. Number two, Green Festival Expo at the Javits Center, April 15, 16, 17. We have 20 free tickets. If you want a free ticket, send me an email. April 17th and 18th at NYU Cannabis Science and Policy Summit. We have discount codes. There's going to be top medical researchers from all over the world there. We got discounts for High NY. Send me an email. April 18th, High NY event that's going to be extra super special. I'll tell you about that later. 4/19, 4/20, Ungas is happening. Dana, stand up real quick. Dana's organizing a demonstration and a rally and a bunch of other really cool stuff. He's got an awesome poster.
These are free!
And they're free! Woo!
Yeah, it's called High and Wild.
Yeah.
hang them in your bathroom.
Oh, speaking of things that have high and Y on them, we've got a lovely merchandise table set up over there where you can buy trinkets and goodies and souvenirs for all your fellow loved ones. 420. Who's excited for 420?
Yeah, let's do something, baby.
Let's do something. Who said that? Who wants to do something?
Let's do something.
Yeah.
Where's Sensi? Sensi, stand up real quick. We got 420 Canna Free NYC at Club Space Ibiza. There's going to be 3 floors of music. There's going to be vendors. There's going to be famous recording artists that we all know and love. What else? It's going to be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Issues, edibles,
Ooh.
meet my professional chef.
Ooh! Did everyone hear that? I can't say that.
Yeah.
No,
There'll be certain edible devices there.
How do we find you?
Cannabis-focused.com, and I would say grab your tickets now. The advance tickets are almost sold out.
Boom. Saturday, that following Saturday, April 23rd in DC, National Cannabis Festival featuring De La Soul. They're having an outdoor music fest. It'll be pretty cool. You guys should take a road trip. And then April 30th, the following Saturday, Innovation in Cannabis event in Philly. Tyler, where's Tyler? See that? Stand up, stand up. It's going to be a day full of just awesome speakers on a variety of topics. Take a trip to Philly, get a cheesesteak, learn about cannabis. That's the man to speak to.
Get a cannabis.
In May 7th, Cannabis Parade.
Alright.
Yes.
Pretty self-explanatory. June 15th to 17th, Cannabis World
Javits
Congress
Center.
and Business Expo at the Javits Center. We got some flyers over there about it. It'll all be in the email. Don't even worry, I got you.
Yeah.
All right.
Now we're gonna plug you?
Who's having fun? Now we
Yeah.
can plug. Yeah.
Events like this
All right. Also, we got the social media on the side if you guys are digitally inclined. Without further ado, I'm going to bring up the man who we're all here for tonight. He is a founding partner of Casa Verde Capital, along with Snoop Dogg and Ted Chung, as well as a seasoned entrepreneur who has about a 10-year stint with one of the biggest financial services companies in the world. Very sharp guy, and he'll be talking about brand building and investment in the cannabis space. Evan, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, Evan Eneman, I'm one of the founding partners, as Mike mentioned, of Casa Verde Capital. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Michael, for organizing and putting these events on. I think it's a great way for people to really come together and share information and have a really productive dialogue about what's going on in the space in New York, but probably more so it's relevant outside of New York. So I didn't really want to go into things that are necessarily on my mind, but also understand and talk about things that are on your mind. This can be more of a conversation and have a dialogue around questions you have, and I know we have a Q&A section at the end, and we can sort of open that up a little more broadly and talk about some of the topics that interest you. We're based in Los Angeles, so probably really the cannabis capital of the world down in Southern California. I think everyone tries to lay claim to that, but if you look at patients and overall consumption, and although you don't have real accurate data at this point, I think it's a pretty good guess to say that that is definitely the leading area in this country specifically. So that's where we're based out of. We do work around the world. In venture, we don't look only for domestic opportunities, although there are many, but we look international as well. Thankfully, this movement is international. I think you're seeing a lot of traction really over the last couple of years to help spread accurate information and help people understand more about what's happening in the space and opening up new markets, which is excellent. So, I know there's a couple of topics, and we talked about Casa Verde Capital as sort of one of those topics, and also Mary Jane as another. So I'll just give you just a brief overview of what we're doing overall, and we can go into some of the questions, some of the topics that you guys have. So this journey for me, I guess, really started freshman year in college. And I say that because it's where I met my current business partner, Ted Chung. And on campus, we always had this entrepreneurial bent to us, and we always wanted to do something. And what connected us at that point was music. And I think music is somewhat of a universal connector for people. I was a terribly bad aspiring DJ, and he was actually a quite good music producer and MC. And so, we did a lot freshman year just to bring a community together on campus, something that we called The Gathering, which drew from the university's campus, but also the surrounding areas in Philly. And it was spoken word and hip hop and anything someone that wanted to get up and share with the community, they were able to do that. And that was really the starting point for everything that's been developing and transpiring over the last 2 decades. I say that because I moved to New York right after school, went the more conservative route in consulting with a large professional services firm, always having that entrepreneurial bug and doing a lot of things on the side. And Ted went back to LA where he was from and jumped right back into the entertainment industry and very fortuitously connected with Snoop early on in Ted's career. Fast forward, many different businesses, creative marketing agency, a talent management company, music publishing, a lot of things in the entertainment world, strategic partnerships, and we started to see the evolution of this industry happening quite rapidly. And we've had this cultural context for a very long time, and not just domestically but internationally. And we started to look at the landscape in the U.S. specifically, and wanted to understand what the opportunities were for us. And so that was a very lengthy process of due diligence, going to all the markets where they were starting to open up the communities for medical use. At the same time, you started to see adult use or recreational use passing as well in Colorado and Washington. So we spent a great deal of time researching those markets diligently and thinking through what our strategy was for the market and how we would enter that. So we had basically our internal special ops team from the marketing agency, from the talent side, from our in-house technology team, and really looked at what are the opportunities for us. And we came up with a few different opportunities and verticals, and we've kept them verticalized for reasons, legal, regulatory, other things that are still evolving in this space. Casa Verde Capital was one of them. It's a venture firm investing in early stage companies. Ancillaries in the industry, so your picks and shovels, your technology-enabled businesses, things of that nature that are helping the industry and the community grow and develop. That's what the focus is there. We also, through that roadmap, developed Mary Jane, which is a content-first, original content, editorial content, technical features and services for the community, as a vertical for us that really helps to reshape the image and the sophistication of what has been out there for quite a long time. It helps us because it's a messaging platform, and one of the things that's most important right now is communication and effective messaging, and really a way to engage with not just people who have been supportive for a very long time, but a very large majority of the population who are really uneducated, and not to say that in a derogatory sense, but just not aware and not really understanding and sort of receiving the information that is available to them. So it's a place for us to share that content and to integrate a lot of what we already do into a platform. So that's part of the ecosystem. And then thirdly was a separate section, which is the Leafs by Snoop line, which launched in Colorado last fall. So those are the verticals, and then we still have our core businesses, which are digital marketing and PR, talent management, strategic partnerships, branding, and business development. So all those form the ecosystem that we have, and it's it's important in the same way that I think this group here in High and Y is important, because it's a community. And as Mike pointed out earlier, it's really important to share information and be as helpful as you possibly can. And so for us, building that ecosystem was a way for us to incubate the thoughts and ideas and concepts that we feel very strongly about, but then also help accelerate all the other ones that people like yourselves are building or trying to develop, or just get involved in and support. So, pretty broad overview of the things that we're doing. How many of you guys, and I know it's sort of hard to share information in events like this, but people who are just interested in learning more about the industry, just a show of hands versus those that are actively involved in supporting it in any one way or another? Like those just learning more about it, trying to get educated? Okay. So a good sized group, but also it looks like a good group that has been involved in one way or another, and you don't ever have to say what that is. So developing brands, as you all know, and there are probably way better experts in this group than I am in developing brands. One of the core competencies to any good business in general is having really strong vision and leadership. And I see that in respect to developing brands, whatever that brand is. Because it's not necessarily what that one person is going to be able to achieve, it's what the entire team collectively is going to be able to help support and develop over time. So for us, developing the brands that we have and developing the opportunities that we look at, it's finding the best partners for us first. And we've done that throughout our careers and everything that we develop. That's sort of key to the process. So understanding who your partners have been and developing relationships very early on, and we were doing that. So we had this core special ops team. We defined what the verticals were going to be. We knew where we wanted to go. We knew the messaging, and you know, we sort of looked at what that means to us. What's authentic to what we do? What's authentic to the sort of 2 decades of brand development that we've had, and how do we bring that to this market? And there's a feedback cycle early on in defining what your core attributes are, defining what your products and services may be, defining who your strategic alliances may be as you're looking to launch that brand, and then ultimately how you develop brand presence and brand messaging and everything that needs to support it. And iterated on that for a couple months and developed the 3 brands that we have and sort of launched into market. And I mentioned there's separation between them. So again, I oversee just the venture division of what we do. And so Mary Jane is one of the portfolio companies of ours. So I'm a little more involved in sort of understanding what they're doing, so I can talk to those more than anything else. But developing a good brand is not something that you just plan to do and execute and think that it's going to happen smoothly. It takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of interactions and one-on-one communication. And one of the things that I've always done throughout my career is equate everything to hospitality. And understanding the service industry and understanding hospitality in depth, for me, and what we've done is sort of one of the core competencies to developing a brand and one that will resonate with a community. So understanding who the audience really is, understanding what you want them to experience throughout that process. And a brand is not a logo, a brand is not a slogan, a brand is a lot more in depth. And so I look at it from a hospitality angle. Every touch point that you have with a consumer or a stakeholder is integral to the brand. And to be very thoughtful about what those touch points are. And it could be as much as I'm thinking about doing something, and what comes to mind, what do I want, what do I have expectations, and how do you help them set those expectations? All the way through to I engaged in that process and I came out the other end and had a great experience. And think through what all those might be as early as you can, knowing that they're going to evolve. And I just, for me, having that mindset has always helped me interacting with people and building those long-standing, sustainable relationships. I don't think many restaurants or hotels would do well if you had patrons that came once and never came back. And that's not just attributable to the food, it's attributable to the entire experience and the brand. So again, I don't really have an agenda to talk about anything specifically. I know Mike had asked a few people to share questions ahead of time so we can talk about some of those, and then we can also jump into other questions that you have now. Just before we jump in there, I'm really excited to see the progress that we've made. And I say we, and I'm coming on the tail end of decades worth of advocacy that's been done. So a lot of respect goes to people that have been in industry supporting this movement for a very long time and are finally starting to see and reap the benefits of that hard work. And that's giving all of us a platform. And it's really nice to see people finally willing to learn more about not this industry, but more so this plant and all plant-based products, plant-based food and diets, just ways of rethinking everything that we're doing in our society today. And I think this industry itself played a big role in furthering that progress that we're making. So I'm really excited to see that. But yeah, any questions that?
First, let's give him a round of applause. Really quickly, I just want to add to that I'm so glad you brought that up. There's a lot of people still going to prison today for selling pot. You can still get a life sentence today for selling pot. So really, as advocates or people interested in this industry, I think that's something we need to be very acutely aware of, because you know, like when big pharma, big whatever comes into the space, they're not going to care so much. So just something I wanted to point out. But we did get a few questions emailed in advance, so I'm going to start with some of those to reward that good behavior. I like that. And then we'll open it up to the room as well.
And I'll caveat with one thing. Some questions I may not be able to answer, so I apologize for not being able to address necessarily all of them for you.
Awesome. So one of the first questions we got was, when you're making an investment, what do you look for in potential entrepreneurs or the teams that you would invest in?
So, I mean, it's a pretty canned answer that any investor will say and the VC will look at. You know, there's two sides from our standpoint of the investment, or really three sides, but it's team first. Who is leading this? Who is the visionary? What are you trying to solve or to bring to the space? And how are you uniquely positioned to do that? That's really core to everything that we look for. As an investor, it's a very long-term relationship you're going to have with an entrepreneur, akin to a marriage or any other really in-depth relationship that you may have. So making sure they have a really good relationship with that person. They may have a great business model, they may have great traction, but if you don't think you're going to get on really well with that entrepreneur and be a good business partner, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So for us, that's a big part of the evaluation process. Having a great product or a great service or great vision for that, if you don't have a product in market yet, also really critical. You know, VCs will traditionally say, well, what's the market opportunity and what's the size of that and what percentage are you taking of that? It's really difficult right now. We don't have very good data. We're looking at very finite bites of information coming out of certain states. So it's important to understand what you think that market opportunity is and how you're looking to address it. But depending on the stage of your company, it's not as critical because you're not really going to have data unless you're looking at comparable industries, which is something that we'd certainly look for you to do. And then ultimately, you know, what's your experience with your execution history? You know, your ideas are great. Everyone has them. Everyone's looking to develop them. You may be a great person as well, and we'd be very supportive, but how are you going to execute? What's your experience? And it doesn't mean you've had to have done something before. It didn't mean you have to start a company or exit a multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar exit, but show me and show us something that we can point to say, okay, we see your experience here, we see what you're able to achieve, we see how you network and build relationships, we see that you're sort of de-risking the investment from an execution risk standpoint. That's something that we're going to look for as well.
Another question we got was, as an investor, what's attractive to you right now, given how market dynamics are shifting, besides high and wide?
High and wide is great on a really broad perspective. Again, communication and messaging,
Really
building the network is really important. And coming out of New York, even more important. New York is a critical market in this movement. You know, the approach you guys have taken here from a regulatory standpoint makes sense for the market, and you guys are helping to bring awareness, at least to the conversation. So, what you know we're really looking for now is what we're going to look for quite some time. It's the progression and the innovation in the industry, and that could be anywhere from agricultural technology and helping to define new ways of you know, growing, you know, fruits and herbs and vegetables and anything else in a really unique and novel way. And for us, you know, that's because you're sort of following these sort of broad global macro trends, you know, around demographic shifts and around accelerating urbanization. So finding new ways to innovate and create not just urban centers, but you know, sort of ecosystems that can function and sort of decrease the footprint through having to transport goods over large distances and having to address communities that are more in need than others. So that's something that we look for. But again, just across the board, fintech in this space right now is, I wouldn't say ripe for disruption, because fintech in general has been for a very long time. This industry has some unique challenges given the federal landscape, but there are plenty of opportunities there to develop really sophisticated and professional products and services to address that side of the market. And then more to what our experience has been, consumer technology, consumer electronics, consumer-facing products. It's so broad. I mean, the industry is moving so rapidly. There isn't any one segment right now. I'm not going to sit here and say it's AI and VR, and sure, that makes sense in this industry as well. How can all of you experience something without having to go to Colorado? Well, you use VR or something like that. So all of those trends that you see in sort of outside ancillary industries are things that we're looking for as well in this space.
Awesome. One last email question before I open up to the room. When you guys were putting together the Leafs by Snoop brand, how do you source that product or choose what product is going to be Snoop's product? Because that's a huge brand. Snoop's brand and cannabis have been linked for a while, so I'm sure people expect the best of the best. So, any insight into that process?
Yeah, that's one of the ones that's going to be hard for me to answer very directly. What I can say is that the team that was really instrumental pulling that together spent a lot of time in that diligence process.
Wait a minute. Testing?
Understanding what the dynamics look like, understanding who we want to have involved in that process, and selecting vendors is never an easy process, regardless of what industry or sector it's in. So making sure that we have, they went through a sort of deep dive analysis of who would be the best partners for that project. So.
Awesome.
And if you're interested in more, I can put you in touch with the teams that can talk more specifically about that as well.
Great. So I'm going to open it up to the room. Tell us your name. Sorry, I saw him first. Tell us your name and then ask your question.
Great. Thanks for speaking tonight. So my name is Matt Green, and I think I'm in half the group that's already sort of embedded in the industry. I'm curious as to your prediction whether ALMA is going to pass in November. And for those just learning the space, ALMA is the Adult Use Medical Act in California that's on the November ballot initiative, where half the state is against it and vociferously, and half the state expects it to pass. And the other half
Isn't paying attention.
is shorting that that's going to pass. I'm interested in your point of view.
So, did everyone hear the question? Or what's going to happen in California? Is what's on the ballot this November going to pass or not? So,
And that's the Adult Use Act. I'm not a prognosticator, and I don't know, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not a pollster. I'm also not an attorney, so I'm not going to comment on those aspects. I agree that there is concern on both sides. I would agree that it is potentially a very pivotal moment for the movement and for progress in this country and beyond. I don't think it's just the US that's looking at California, I think it's the world. So it's really important. I'll just say from being in California, it's not very well messaged at this point. Most people are, even in California, very unfamiliar with the details. That's been intentional for a very long period of time. So that's going to create challenges, and I think some people are skeptical of the intent. Other people want to see the progress, and I think they're going to butt heads a little bit. Hopefully it's not like what happened in Ohio. I think people had pretty grandiose expectations about really engaging in the community, and I hope that's just not the same in California.
Good, thanks.
young lady.
Back to branding. Barbara Paley is my name. I was very impressed that you chose Pentagram. Which partner did you deal with? Was it Michael or Paula?
No, so I was not involved in the design team working with Pentagram. It was not either of those two partners, though. I'm trying to think of what her name is. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, but again, if you want to follow up and get more into detail, then certainly can.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful message.
Yeah, and just in that, in and of itself, like one of the things as you launch is think about what people perceive your brand to be before you actually launch, and making sure you're putting out what you want your brand to actually be. And that was a big part for, even with Mary Jane, when we thought about that, it's what perspective do you want to have and what is lacking in the industry. For us, and for many, it was a woman's point of view. And so we worked with a lot of female designers and people that gave feedback from that perspective, because we see it as needing to be more inclusive rather than exclusive.
So your future of your company and its investments, where are you right now in your standing dealing with hemp and the way the Farmers Act just got brought in, and where do you see it going for you guys personally? Are you going to invest, or what are you going to do?
Yeah, so again, for us, it's an interesting market segment. I think it opens up tremendous opportunities. We are looking at it. It has, I think, a very different trajectory overall, because it sort of fits into the medical versus adult use conversation way differently, because it's not even part of that conversation, other than if you're thinking through CBD and nutraceuticals or other hemp-based products, which, by the way, happen to be one of the largest industries in this country, with food products and clothing and building, everything.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, right now we import the majority of that.
90 million a year.
Yeah, which is, from an economic standpoint, very unfortunate.
Crazy. Yeah.
So, and that's not even the agricultural side of it, which is a
Right.
whole other side.
Which state would you recommend a tech startup to incorporate?
Which state would I recommend a tech startup to incorporate in?
Cannabis industry.
Again, I am not an attorney, so I do not give legal advice. I can tell you a lot of companies that we have seen are incorporated in Delaware, depending on what they're doing. Others may choose to incorporate in other states where you're going to operate, whether that be Nevada or California, or So I would seek the advice of an attorney, which I am not.
We have some in the room though, so.
Yeah.
Dylan, you got a question?
Yeah, so thank you for speaking. Looking at the landscape in California, even just a couple of months ago, well-respected businesses like Midwest, who were run by very well-respected titans on their end, and they get raided. And these things happen in California, and we often tend to know that sometimes in business conversations. We were talking about the great expansion that's happening and the way we're helping patients. How do you advise the partners you work with to be good stewards of industry to ensure that patients don't lose access and businesses don't shut down?
Yeah, so the question is, in California, obviously most of the conversation is around how great everything is and how fast this movement is going, and what's happening around the country as well. But then you also still have people who are respected operators in the industry getting raided and shut down and disrupting their business operations, even though they are, good corporate citizens and also good community members. And what is our perspective on that? It's a challenge. It's unfortunate. It's, again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't comment on the legality of what and why. It's something that is, always going to be in question until there is, really significant change from a regulatory standpoint at the federal level. And it's just one of those risk factors that you need to consider as an operator and that we need to consider as an investor. And you mitigate that risk as best you can by adhering to any possible regulation, ordinance, or otherwise, not only in the industry, but in the business community as well. Every agency that you need to comply with, and presenting what you're actually doing and being as transparent as you can be. And so, helping to demystify the operations of your business and ultimately the patients that you're trying to help and why you're trying to do that. But there's no
No, of course,
silver
no,
bullet.
no magic bullet, just your take. Thank you.
Dovetail off that question, how are you advising your investments as far as where they are depositing their cash?
Yeah. Whoops.
Short of Federal Credit Union that I guess in Colorado is over there.
Everyone's working out the solutions themselves, technically. You know, from our standpoint, a lot of the businesses we work with, you know, if it's a technology platform or otherwise, don't necessarily transact with that, and don't have the same issue that a cultivator or a, you know, caregiver may. So, you know, there are options in states that are very supportive, and local credit unions and some state chartered banks. There are many people trying to develop outlets for that, and just to continue to network and find it. It's sort of like the crown jewels. If you do find something that works, and you can't really share that because that's the viability of your business. But you know, with that said, I think there's been some progress in that space. There are companies that, say, you know, armored car companies that are providing different services that they have not in the past, and it's because of this issue. So there are workarounds, and people are finding them.
Could you comment on the competitive and valuation dynamics in the venture space today? You know, when I look at the venture space, I see new firms forming. You know, are you running into competition for the high quality assets? How do you differentiate yourself? And on the valuation expectations side, you know, could you comment on that? You know, is there too much hype in the industry today? And then how do you extricate yourself from the Silicon Valley unicorn bubble and expectations for that?
Great questions. So just because of the nature of how we operate and the types of companies that we're looking for, we're differentiated in several ways. I mean, the core team itself is, you know, from very unique and distinctive backgrounds that come together to form a very cohesive team, and we vet everything through that same filter. Many early stage companies are looking for some sort of advice beyond just the capital, or some sort of value add beyond just the capital. And a lot of that comes from the network that we've already developed in traditional industries. A lot of it also comes from our ability to accelerate through influencers and brand ambassadors that we have relationships with and direct connection to. So, you know, aside from just our traditional industry experience, you know, coming from regulatory compliance and enterprise risk, coming from, you know, traditional investment banking and money management, coming from, you know, sales and trading, coming from marketing and branding, taking all those core competencies and pulling it together into one partnership is a really strong thing for any startup organization to have without having to necessarily pay for that. You know, competition in terms of running up against good deals, I haven't experienced that yet. Most of the conversations we have, people understand why they're coming to us and the value that we bring. And, you know, we see a tremendous amount of inbound deals, but then we also see a lot of, well, we don't see them, but we have partners that we've worked with in the past that are filtering for us as well, and are also bringing in high quality deals. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people popping up, and they're looking to sort of find the financial reward in the space. And for me, long term, it certainly has that. It's part of what investing is all about. But there's you know, a really strong strategic through line around helping to build a really sophisticated and robust and professional industry, which is more important than any one of our investments. So, you know, some of our deals may not be your traditional unicorn-sized outlook. They might be something that's bringing more safety and reliability to the industry. And although they will scale and be very nice companies, and they already have traction, they're revenue generating, they're not necessarily going to be multi-billion-dollar opportunities early on. Long term, they will be. So, you know, that's a big part for us too in our investment strategy. And sorry, the last part was valuations. Yeah. Valuations are all over the place, and that's not in this industry, that's just in VC in general. So one of the big differences in our space is a lot of companies are cash flow positive very early on in their life cycle. So the decision between customer acquisition and growth at scale without revenue isn't really one that we contend with, even for those companies that are building technology platforms. So the dynamic's a little bit different. So we'll look at your financial health early on as one key indicator. We'll look at the sector and the segment that you're in as another. But we do make sure that the assumptions underlying the valuations are pretty clear and they're ones that we can get behind. Otherwise, we'll call it into question. And the reality is it's all over the place. So you really just have to understand what the market's looking like. If we know the comps as we do, then we can sort of see what each one is doing differently as we're evaluating them to see if they're even in line. And some with an unrealistic expectation would also make us question, do they understand their business, do they understand the market, or are they just overhyping what they're doing? I would say unfortunately there's a lot of that, a tremendous amount of that. But again, I would say that's in every industry. I mean, the technology VC space, that most of it is marketing and hype. And you see very many companies come out that are great companies, but there's an engine behind it, which is marketing. And you can call it hype or you can call it what it is.
How do you feel about the labeling and the dosing of infused products and how they combat in terms of what we've been seeing in California or Colorado, the big problem with labeling and child resistant,
Sure.
things like that?
Yeah, so what do I think about labeling and dosage requirements and packaging requirements about child-resistant packaging and opaque packaging and how that it's different in every single state at the moment and trying to create some uniform standards for that. So for me, what's important is that people understand what they're doing and that they're responsible. So I really welcome strong regulations from the sense of ensuring product quality, ensuring that patients know what the dosage is, that it's tested, that it's accurate, that it's a repeatable experience. So I welcome it. I think in any new industry, especially one that's been villainized for decades as this one has, it's going to take time to get past the sort of scared factor and being overly cautious. And the challenge is people are making really great looking and great tasting products.
Yeah.
So it's different than some other consumables that, as a child or a young adult, they're not really that appealing in smell or in taste. This one is, so there's a much greater risk factor there. So I want to see the measures that provide safety. I do think there needs to be a balance between how many levels of child-proof packaging needs to go into any one product, the cost of doing so, and finding ways for the industry to minimize that. I mean, margins are extremely thin already. To add additional compliance hurdles, it's just challenging for operators. But I welcome it.
Yeah, so you said you guys are typically investing in early stage startups. What's the typical check and how big is the fund and how many deals are you guys continue to do this year?
Sure. So it really varies. So to talk about decisions that we make for each individual company is very different. But it's early on, $100,000 to $400,000 checks in companies, depending on what part of the life cycle they're at. Pre-seed, seed, Series A, traction, everything else. So we're looking at a lot of different companies and deals. And so is that in the tens a year or more potentially? It's going to be a function of the market and of the entrepreneurs entering the space as well. We're not just going to make investments because there's a new company that happens to be in the space, unless it's a great company that we know is really going to have traction and the ability to scale. So that could be one deal, it could be 50 deals. It really just depends on what the market dynamic looks like.
Out of all the deals that you guys see in a year, is there like any most frequent mistakes or red flags that you see that starts coming to the table that cause you not to invest?
So out of all the deals, are there any, I guess, common mistakes, red flags, or pitfalls that would indicate to us not to do a deal? The most, well, I'm not gonna say the most common, but a common one for us is not doing enough research on the market. To say you're the best, it's subjective, so I'm okay with that, and I would hope you have the ability to sort of feel confident. Humility also helps, but you know, coming in and saying there's only 2 competitors and naming the 2 when there are 8, and we've talked to 7 of your competitors already, that's not a great signal to me that you're either serious about the space or you know where to find that information. So we'll dialogue and say, you know, how did you research this, so we can go through what their process was. If their process made sense and they just didn't have information available, then that's not really an issue. But more often than not, they, you know, some entrepreneurs just haven't done their diligence. So that's probably the biggest red flag for me. You know, team is probably second. You know, coming and saying we know that we can do this and not having the right team behind them, and having a clear reason for each team member. That's probably the other one, because the hardest thing you're going to do in starting a business, one is function as a team effectively, and 2 is build that team. So if you're starting off not building the right team and not really knowing what that dynamic should be or asking those questions is a red flag for us.
Last question.
Hi, my name is Steven, and my question is, if I'm starting a new company and a company wants to sell me a website name, a domain name with .com for $1,000, is it worth it, or should I just make the domain name something other than .com?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question.
So should you buy domains that are in existence but have no...
For my company.
For your company?
Yeah, can you understand?
It's absolutely not necessary. You can build a brand around whatever name you want. You'll probably come across some SEO experts that will tell you that you need to buy every single domain that closely resembles anything that you're doing or competitors. It's not necessarily the case either. So I wouldn't focus on that. It's not going to define your brand. It would certainly make it easier for people to search and find you. But hopefully you're doing a good enough job in your communication and awareness and marketing that they're going to find you anyway.
That's the rather.
Good question.
Good to see you so much, Evan.
Well, hey, we still have some time, so for those folks who didn't get a chance to ask questions, we still have the space for about 20 minutes, so.
Yeah, and just one other thing, I mean, I am very much a sponge right now as much as you guys are, and I'm looking to meet everyone and talk to everyone about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So feel free to reach out to me. Give you my email tonight, give you a card if I have one. It's pretty easy to reach me. It's just evan@casaverdecapital.com. Please don't spam me. I've had someone who is now on his 40th email that he keeps including in the subject header, and as much as I love his tenacity, it's a little much. So that's probably the other red flag for me. Is we're not going to invest in this company or at this point even respond. So be patient if we don't get back to you. If I don't get back to you, I will follow up with all of you, and feel free to contact me at any point in time. And thank you all for listening to
Don't assume it's in the bag, right? Everybody feels like cannabis legalization in America is inevitable. They're beginning to think marijuana is just going to legalize itself. The people looking to make money in this are just counting on all the activists to just keep doing what they're doing without thinking where the money is coming from to make that happen. And the activists sometimes are getting so overconfident that they think we can win anything.